Good afternoon. I'm Damien Dumar, publisher of The Last Harvest by Lucy and Mars. This is episode number 2 of a weekly podcast that I'm doing, highlighting news articles of the week that reinforce the themes of The Last Harvest by Lucy and Mars. The main theme of the book is that the elite are planning a global genocide of 90% of the planetary population, and that this plan for global genocide will commence in 2025. That does not mean that in 2025 the world's going to come to an end, but events will start to go into motion that by around the year 2050, there will be no more humans left on this planet. If you think I'm joking around or this is a fantasy or delusion, I would advise you check below, thelastharvest.info, check out the book on Amazon, check out the audiobook on Amazon if you'd like to listen instead of read. And I assure you that by the time you're done reading this book, you won't be laughing anymore and you won't think it's a joke. So with that in mind, let's look at some of these articles. In a piece of rather good news, I see an article here that says, "Sorry, Elon, Americans don't want a brain chip." So there was a poll conducted, mind you, a very small poll. And I believe the poll was only involving 1,000 respondents with a margin of error of plus or minus 3.9. And they found that if the technology moved past the experimental stage and was to be commercially sold, only about 8% of those 1,000 respondents would consider getting a computer chip implanted in their brain. That's a good sign. However, it's only 1,000 participants. And as the future goes forward, who knows, maybe Taylor Swift will start talking about her brain implant and suddenly every woman in the United States will have a brain implant. It's really that easy for people to be influenced. Don't think it isn't. What's quite fascinating about this article is over here, it says that science fiction readers are first in line. And what's really interesting, it says, "Indeed, if there is a demographic of interest for Neuralink, it's basically, quote, people who say they have read Frank Herbert's Dune," end quote. And it said, all told, 19% of respondents who said they read Dune would get a commercially available brain chip, and 11% of respondents who said they read Dune would get one this year. This is going to become very interesting as we go forward, because March 1st is the premiere of Dune 2 in theaters, which I plan to see because I am a fan of the Dune film franchise. I remember in the early 1980s when the first one came out. And I think that this third reboot, which Dune 1 was a few years ago, was actually really good. But as we go forward with today's podcast, we will see something very sinister connected to what is basically an incredible film, a very wonderful piece of science fiction. So now I'm beginning to think twice when I go see that film, what's in this film that they're trying to program you with? But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's look at the next article. Mark Zuckerberg says he won't be lining up for a brain chip like Elon Musk's Neuralink anytime soon. And I don't blame him. Now, some would say, well, he's not doing that because he's envious, because he's competing with Elon Musk and he wishes he had his own brain chip. Well, perhaps there's something to that, but I don't think that's what's driving him here. And he actually said on a podcast this Friday, quote, "I wouldn't want to use version 1 of that," end quote. And I wouldn't want to use anything version 1 anyway. I mean, you don't ever want to upgrade Windows to the latest version because Microsoft uses the general population to work out the bugs. You certainly, well, when it comes to brain implants, you never want one anyway. If there's any way to anger the Divine Father, it is to get a brain implant, to use your free will to basically give up your free will. Because if you get a brain implant, it works both ways. Just like you can access the internet can access you. And who do you think is behind the internet and all the technology? It's the Greys. So it is really a bad idea for your future, your soul's future, to go get a brain implant. And when you hear me say this, you may say, well, how can he say that this angers the Divine Father? Well, go ask him. Why don't you? You don't need to be religious to pray. You can pray to the Divine Father even if you don't believe in any sort of religion. That's actually what the Divine Father wants. It's for you to reach out to him, free from the confines or barriers of any sort of religion, and acknowledge him and establish a relationship with him. So if there's anything that you hear me talk about in this podcast, if there's anything that you see in The Last Harvest on thelastharvest.info, if there's anything you see in the book when you read it or hear in the podcast, you want confirmation, ask the Divine Father. It's that simple. There you have it. So now what's interesting here, if we come back to this article, is that he talks about, well, he wouldn't want to use version 1 of that. Now, when we look at some of Elon Musk's other projects, for example, his Tesla automobiles, when you look at the kind of accidents that his Tesla cars got into and how little Elon Musk cares about the general population, I don't think anyone should even think about something like a brain implant, irrespective of the obvious that it angers the Divine Father and it's one of the dumbest things you can do with your free will is to get a brain implant. But just take a look at this. During the Super Bowl, Tesla didn't run any commercials, but a tech CEO from the Dawn Project aired an anti-Tesla Super Bowl ad. And here, if we see if we can get this a little bit larger and take a look at it. No, looks like it's not going to play. Well, let's see if it will play on this. Because I think people should see this. Here we go. Let's take a look.
Tesla that its self-driving software would blow past a stop school bus and run down a child crossing the road. Tesla did nothing. So we ran a Super Bowl commercial warning Tesla of this danger. Tesla still did nothing. 2 months later, a self-driving Tesla blew past a stop school bus, putting a child on a ventilator with a fractured neck and broken leg. Still, Tesla does nothing. Boycott Tesla to keep your kids safe. A year ago, the Dawn Project.
Now, this isn't made up. These are actual facts. You can go and verify them. A Tesla car blew through a stop sign, mowed down a child, put it on a ventilator, and the child now has permanent damage. Does anybody care? No. This is the type of mentality that Elon Musk has. On one hand, he talks about how he's so into humanity and yada, yada, yada. On the other hand, he builds cars that run down children. And I've been in a lot of Teslas because I take a lot of Ubers. And I always talk to Tesla drivers about their car. And most of them love the Tesla because it's sort of like people who are into MacBooks love Apple products. But they'll all say that any of these advanced auto driving features, you can't use them, that they're incredibly dangerous, and you end up in accidents, and that these cars have no idea what they're doing. Yet these are all on the road. And this sort of strategy of advancing technology was really promoted by former New York City Mayor Bloomberg, who was and still is a very famous business person, where he claimed that the reason his company was so far ahead of the competition is while they were still trying to iron out the bugs on version 1, he was already working on version 10. And the way he did that is he simply brought his bug-ridden software out to market and forced it onto the consumer and had them troubleshoot it for him, which is really unethical and messed up, even if it is an effective way to do business. And we can see here that Tesla is using the same strategy on its cars. So if it does this with cars and doesn't care about children being run down, you think he cares about what's going to happen when chips go into your head? And keep in mind, this is the guy who's developing a space program, right? Very not good. On the other hand here, we have another article from OpenAI Sam Altman, who seeks the U.S. blessing, meaning money and help, to raise billions for AI chips. So despite the fact that human beings really have no business playing around with artificial intelligence because they have the emotional development of children and no wisdom whatsoever, we still see this race to develop AI chips. Now, I can't be completely against what Sam Altman's doing, because during the pandemic, what we noticed is that there was a giant chip shortage because all of the United States chips are being made by China, an alleged enemy. Even Corvette couldn't produce the latest mid-engine car that they engineered because they didn't have the chips. And this was a problem throughout the United States where people simply could not acquire the microchips that they needed. And that a country like the United States could put themselves in a situation where one of the most fundamental resources, computer chips, are no longer being made here is preposterous. So in that respect, from a strategic point of view, of course it makes sense to really promote chip production in the United States. However, when they're promoting it for the use of AI, this is a huge problem. Of course, we also have to realize that when you go to other alien planets and alien civilizations, they all have a one world government. And I'm not talking about a new world order. I'm talking about a one world government. And it's not based on a popularity contest. It's based on merit and ability. So a planet will not have many, many countries on it all fighting and competing for resources and developing things with no wisdom behind it. So the whole planet would get together and say, hey, listen, we're going to develop this AI. This is potentially dangerous. Let's have our greatest minds look at it. Let's all work together. This doesn't get out of control. But on a planet like ours, the only one in this universe probably that has multiple countries led by idiots who want a popularity contest, what we have is endless competition. Well, we can't let the Chinese develop AI because then they'll dominate us. So we have to develop it first to dominate them. And every country is saying the same thing. And they're not thinking about the consequences of what they do. So this article is interesting because on one hand, on the surface level, you look at it and you say, well, this is a smart, wise thing to do from the perspective of the United States, but from the perspective of the planet and everyone on it, it is a very, very bad idea. Now, let's get back to Dune. This is very interesting. So, Zendaya stuns at Dune Part 2 world premiere in vintage silver cyborg suit by Mugler. I don't know who Mugler is, but he's probably some fashion designer, and I really could care less. But when I look at this outfit that this actress, I guess her name is Zendaya, I'm too old to follow celebrities, but I did see her in Dune 1. Look very carefully. I don't know if I could expand the size of this picture. I can't actually. But look very carefully at it. She is in a robotic cyborg suit. Now, there are no robotic cyborgs in Dune, the film's franchise, nor are there anyone in those film franchises wearing a suit like this. So why would she be wearing this at the premiere of Dune Part 2 when it has nothing to do with what's in the movie? Let's think about this. I said earlier that curiously a poll said that people who watch Dune are the most amenable to getting brain implants. Now, I'm not sure why people who are fans of Dune would be more slanted towards getting a brain implant than fans of, say, Battlestar Galactica, but apparently they are. And could there be a tie-in between that and the fact that this woman, the hot girl, in quotes, of the film, is wearing a cyborg suit, sending a message to fans of Dune? Is there something in the Dune film that is subliminal, that influences them to want to get brain implants? We're about to find out. Take a look at that suit. Does anyone remember where they've seen this suit before? I don't think most of you will, because most of you haven't been alive for very long. Now, I'm 53 years old. I was born in 71, but I still remember the science fiction of old. So the question is, where have we seen this suit before? Are you ready? 1927 film, Fritz Lang's Metropolis, the cyborg robot female. Here's a picture from the film itself. And what do you see behind the cyborg? An inverted pentagram. How interesting. What do you see Elon Musk posing in? A suit with satanic symbols on it. Do you begin to see? It's right in front of you. This is not a conspiracy theory. Well, it is a conspiracy of sorts, but it's not a theory. Everything I'm saying, you can see it right here. I'm not making this up. Why would the female lead of the Dune film series be dressed in the Metropolis suit from the 1927 Fritz Lang classic that has symbology like this? And is it a coincidence that people who watch the Dune series are most amenable to getting a brain implant? Wake up. You're being manipulated. How much clearer can I make this for you? And I'm sure I feel bad talking about this because if you watched Dune 1 of the third reboot, it's an incredible film. And I don't get any feelings to get a brain implant after watching it. And I've seen it several times. Last thing I would ever do is get a brain implant. Yeah, pretty much. I can't think of anything lower on the list than getting a brain implant. No, I can't. So it's right here for all to see. And if you read The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars, this will all make plenty sense. Because who is pushing AI? It's ultimately the gray extraterrestrials who control this planet, who push AI because they want a chip in your head, because when the elite who work for them do their job of eliminating 90% of the world's population, the remaining 10% are going to be hybridized slaves. And what better way to be a slave than to have a chip in your head where you can be controlled and influenced? It's right in front of you, right in front of you. And again, if you don't believe anything I'm saying, if you read the book, and if you read the book and you still don't believe what's in the book, well, pray, ask the Divine Father. Now here we go. Let's look at some other absolutely ridiculous things that are going on. So Elon Musk, the clown that he is, launches a bid to control Mars, saying Earth has no authority. And what this is really about is this idea that somewhere in the Starlink contracts is a clause that specifies that SpaceX is the ultimate legal authority on Mars. I wonder if the extraterrestrials on Mars know that Starlink and SpaceX and Elon Musk is the ultimate authority on Mars. Because there's plenty of extraterrestrials on Mars right now. There's underground bases and cities. There's warfare going on. If Elon Musk ever did travel out there right now, he would be shot down in seconds. This is really ridiculous that this guy actually thinks that somehow he is going to go to Mars and take over and turn it into his own fiefdom. I mean, only in the human mind do you find this level of delusion. Here's another interesting article. Military officials break their silence on UFOs interfering with missiles. And this is an article about an event that happened in the 60s that some former military people have come forward about, where they said that a UFO had shot down a nuclear missile. And that is correct, that the Greys and other extraterrestrials do have the ability to not only intercept, but to shut down all nuclear weapons on this planet. The corollary of that is they also have the ability to launch them. They can override any security, any launch code systems, anything. And they can easily start a nuclear conflict. This is something to think about. Now, when people think about nuclear weapons today, one of the problems that people have is they still think about nuclear weapons in terms of what happened in Japan, at Nagasaki and Hiroshima, where someone flew over with a plane and dropped a crude fission bomb onto the cities of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Where they don't realize without some research is that most nuclear missiles today travel in speeds of excess of Mach 27, can cover the planet, fly very low to the ground, can't be shot down with human technology, and carry payloads so massive that one of these missiles could vaporize all 5 boroughs of New York City, and then some. They just have no concept about it. So it'll be interesting to see going forward how the nuclear threat on this planet will play out. Now that we know that extraterrestrials have the ability to turn them on and off at will, to launch them, to shoot them down, to prevent them from ever taking off, human beings do not realize how disadvantaged they are. They do not realize that extraterrestrial technology, in many cases, is several 100 million years more advanced than ours. This is something the mind can't even comprehend. And it's something that's very important to keep in mind, though, going forward. This also ties into the idea that, well, why are so many of Elon Musk's rockets exploding and not taking off? Well, it's because extraterrestrials shoot them down. They're not using a gun or a laser cannon, but they have the technology to make sure they never make it up into the orbit. They don't want Elon Musk or any human beings in space. Got news flash. No one's ever going to space. Oh, you people have fantasies about going out there and exploring the universe. It's never going to happen. Hate to tell it to you. If you want to know why, read The Last Harvest by Lucy and Mars. There are no extraterrestrials out there that particularly like you. Most of them very dislike you, if not downright despise and detest you. No, it's not what people want to hear, but it's the truth. Let's look at some other cool stories here. Oh, look at this. But Musk doesn't learn. Now he plans to create a $100 million compound in Texas that he wants to rename Starbase. Man, I think that just speaks for itself. That's the spirit. Never give up. Here's another interesting comment by this idiot, where he says, what kind of psycho would want Ukraine to keep fighting Putin? And he makes an argument that the Ukrainians really are serving no constructive purpose in fighting the Russians. And on the surface level, that would appear to be true, because after all, their country is in rubble right now, and how are you really going to defeat the Soviet Union? That's a good question. As a matter of fact, if you go back to World War II, the one thing that the Germans didn't really figure on was the incredible productive capacity of both the United States and Russia. At the time, it was the Soviet Union. They just could not imagine. So while German tanks, let's say for those of you who have seen the movie Fury with Brad Pitt, while a German Tiger tank could take out 70 Russian tanks before it got taken out, it didn't matter when there were 50,000 Russian tanks. You just get overwhelmed by the numbers. And we see the same phenomenon occurring right now in the Ukraine, where the Russian military is really something of an embarrassment, but it doesn't matter because they have an endless supply of people and an incredible manufacturing capacity. So in the end, you just get overrun. So why would it make sense to keep fighting Putin? Well, the most obvious reason, and I'm not taking a side, don't get this wrong, I'm not taking a side in the conflict. I'm not on the side of the Ukrainians. I'm not on the side of the Russians. Take no side at all. I'm just observing this conflict through the lens of The Last Harvest by Lucy and Mars. Well, those who have read The Last Harvest know that all of the world's leaders are under the control of the Nebu Gray. Now, you have to say to yourself, why would Putin, who is 71 years old, suddenly become filled with ambition to take back the Ukraine? You're 71 years old. Wouldn't it be better to just enjoy your life and your mistresses and ride off into the sunset shirtless like he likes to do in all his public relations campaigns? Well, no, not if you're being influenced by the Nebu Gray to start World War III. I brought this up before. Why would someone like Putin, who has a daughter and probably other children around the place, be talking about this idea of nuclear war, saying that if NATO keeps encroaching on the Soviet Union, actually it's Russia now, if NATO keeps encroaching on Russia, that he'll be forced to use nuclear weapons? Why would you be saying that if you have children? Unless you are a psycho, as Elon Musk suggests, or you don't have to be a psycho. You simply have to be under the influence of the extraterrestrials who control everything that's going on this planet. And the issue here, why the United States keeps lending support to the Ukraine. And that's not to say that the US leaders aren't also under the influence of the Nebu Gray, because they are. But what's to say that Putin would stop with the Ukraine and not take all of Europe? And who would stand up against him? Because, after all, no one really would necessarily want to use nuclear weapons, unless, of course, they're influenced in doing so. So, while it is true on a certain level that the Ukrainians fighting against Russia may be rather pointless, on a larger level, we're looking at a situation where, again, the leaders of the world are being influenced and leading this planet into ruin. And in the end, I should point out again, if no soldier followed orders to go into the Ukraine, then there'd be no need to fight Russia. But people, this is what they do with their free will. Here we have another article. Oh, how interesting. Maybe it is a good idea to pay more attention to what Putin's doing. The White House says it's tracking a new Russian space weapon that violates a nuclear arms treaty. Well, they don't go into detail as to what it is, and conspiracy theorists might say this is all just fake news and another excuse to start World War III. And, well, in the end, that's the goal of the Nebu Gray, who are behind the powers on this planet. They want to start a World War III because that's one of the great vectors of depopulation. I mean, nothing really spells depopulation like a nuclear conflict. World War III without nukes would also be a good start, especially when combined with things like famine and viruses. But hey, with nuclear warheads, wow, you can really accomplish that goal fast. Might not have to wait till 2050. Now, this is an article I found very, very, very interesting. Iran declares Antarctica its property in direct challenge to Biden and the global treaty. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the whole story of Antarctica, all the nations on the planet, or at least all the major ones that mattered, signed a treaty a long time ago that no one would go into Antarctica and try to exploit its resources, build military bases, or explore. Now, one has to say, when did you ever hear of all nations getting together and agreeing not to do something like that, especially when you know that Antarctica is filled with natural resources? Well, the answer is very simple. It's because the Earth is hollow, and in Antarctica is one of the entranceways into the hollow Earth. And the extraterrestrials who live down there made it very clear to human beings that you are not coming down here. And that's the end of the story. That's the reason behind it. So I find it really funny that a country like Iran, which is, as far as nations go, really towards the bottom there, actually has the audacity to declare Antarctica its property in direct challenge to Biden and the global treaty. Well, they're not just challenging a global treaty or Biden. They're challenging all the extraterrestrials who live inside the planet. It's as if human beings are just begging for it. It's bad enough you have problems with the Nebu Gray controlling you all. Now you want to mess around with every group that's living inside the hollow Earth. Yeah, I know you might hear this and say, what are you talking about? The world isn't hollow. Well, all planets are hollow. Newsflash. You can read about it in The Last Harvest. And again, if you don't believe it's true, start praying, ask the Divine Father, is this true? Is Damien Dumar talking nonsense on this podcast? Just go ask him. I mean, why not? It's free. He would love for you to reach out to him and acknowledge him as your creator and try to get a closer relationship with him. What have you got to lose? Ask him. So I think it's really funny when I see something like this, a country like Iran saying, oh yeah, Antarctica is now our property and we're going to go down there. I mean, the United States should just let them, because they're going to get vaporized by the alien technology that's going to come out to greet them. I mean, it's just silly. But then again, when you look at the history of Iran, it's a lot of silliness because they're humans and humans are silly. Now, here's another article about Iran. I want to talk about World War III kicking off. Iran's rise as global arms supplier vexes U.S. and its allies. A lot of you didn't probably realize what a huge arms supplier Iran actually is. Mind you, they're not supplying the latest and high-tech rail guns to the Navy or something like this, but they're supplying the type of high-tech weapons that people love to fight with today. Remote-controlled drones, for example. We see how drones are used throughout the Ukrainian conflict, in the Middle East, and they're basically arming everyone in sight. Here's another great article. New ammunition plant launched to keep up with Ukraine war demand. Now, where is this ammunition plant? Oh, Germany and Denmark participated in a groundbreaking ceremony for a new ammunition factory in northern Germany, emphasizing Europe's efforts to increase weapons production amid Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine. Now, what did I say earlier about Russia planning to take all of Europe? Perhaps the Germans and the Danes know something that we don't. Perhaps they're not just building ammunition factories to fund the Ukrainians. After all, the Ukrainians get so much money and weapons for us. Why are they really creating these ammunition factories? A lot of people don't know this about World War II, but certain historians probably will be able to back me up on this. But the Russians were planning to overrun Europe, just as Hitler was planning to overrun Russia. It was mutual. Both sides were looking at each other and saying, hey, let's go take the other. So history repeats itself. Why would it not be happening now? Some people would say, well, Putin's an old man. He wants to leave a legacy. No, he's under the influence of the Greys, as all these world leaders are. What else we got going on here? This is something else I thought very curious. This is a video of Israeli soldiers filming themselves blowing up a mosque. And this habit of filming your activities is something that doesn't just go on in the Middle East, but it goes on in the Ukraine as well. You can go online, and apparently every soldier in combat these days is wearing a GoPro camera on either their helmet or their plate carrier and filming all their activities, even if they're war crimes. Which is very strange because you would think that if you were in a war and confronted with what you're confronted with in war, that your main objective would be survival and not filming it to upload it to social media to get likes. So I think generations of people playing video games like Call of Duty and all these first-person shooter war games has really done something to humanity. Now, some people would be quick and say, like, this guy is showing his puss right now, saying, oh, well, you know, soldiers, they've always been documenting themselves on the battlefield. They've taken pictures of what's going on. There's a difference between having photojournalistic ambitions and taking photos of things on the battlefield as opposed to acting like a young girl with an Instagram account who wants to show off every little thing she does to get likes and clout. This is not exactly an activity that would make much sense if you think about it, that people are broadcasting all of their activities in warfare, including war crimes, proudly, and that people are watching it and looking at it just as entertainment. It's really, it's not a good thing, and it further desensitizes people to what's coming, and that's planned, and it also agitates people. Because people see what's going on and they get more and more agitated and they think less and less. And everyone rushes forward to war, and it's exactly what's desired. Remember, the agenda of the Greys, who control the elite on this planet, their agenda is to eliminate 90% of you. It's 9 out of 10. Look around you. 9 out of 10 people around you, they want them dead. And for those of you who survive, they want you slaves. Don't believe me? Read The Last Harvest. The Last Harvest is not the words of Lucien Mars. It is the words of your own leaders, your own documents. The book is filled with quote after quote of your world leaders talking about how they're going to kill 90% of you. It's not made up. You don't believe me? Buy the book. Buy the ebook. It's only a few dollars. You don't like to read? Buy the audiobook. Find out now before it's too late, because very soon it will be too late. Finally, here we have Trump. And of course, he's threatening NATO allies, saying some very uneducated and uninformed things like he normally does, saying that if certain members of NATO aren't paying their dues, that we're not going to go help them. Well, I'm not even going to address this level of commentary because it's very dumb and uninformed. But what we have here is a situation where Trump really idolizes Putin because Putin is a warlord and Trump would like to be a warlord as well. It's already a matter of public record that during the events of the last term, he tried to take over this country. And were it not for one Secret Service agent who refused to drive him to the Capitol to participate in this, he may have succeeded. If Trump gets reelected, can you not see him immediately making himself the last American president? This is a man who idolizes Putin. So it makes perfect sense why he wouldn't want to support NATO. And if you think that Trump isn't under the influence of the Nebel Gray aliens, well, you need to go read The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars. So again, this is a part of an ongoing weekly podcast as we approach 2025. I will every week go over all the stories that I find on the internet that support what is in the book, The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars. And as we enter 2025 and proceed through 2025, it's my intention to continue documenting these events. So before it's too late, buy the book, get the audiobook, get the ebook, read what's in there. Go to thelastharvest.info and see the 1 hour and 20-minute speech of me talking in Vegas at the Luxor, explaining what's in the book, explaining how the elite are planning to kill you off, explaining the history of the various extraterrestrial civilizations that influenced this planet and continue to influence this planet. Learn about this. Start praying. You don't need to be religious. All the Abrahamic religions that are going to be kicking off World War III are all creations of the Anunnaki in order to foster warfare and in order to create a separation between you and your Creator, the Divine Father. So forget about them. Start praying, establishing your relationship directly, read The Last Harvest, watch my speech, get educated, follow this podcast, and watch it all unfold. That's my advice for today. I'll see you next week.